Hello and welcome to The Excerpt. I'm Dana Taylor. Americans hustle, we get after it, and while having the ability, desire, and energy to accomplish extraordinary things is commendable, it can also lead to burnout and high levels of stress. Is it time for some of us to slow down? Slow living is a radical approach to self-care which celebrates a less hectic pace of life, along with making mindful choices to enhance our well-being. Is it possible to marry our desire to have it all with a slow living lifestyle? Here to help us get a better understanding of the slow living movement is author Rachel Schwartzmann, whose new book, Slowing, came out this fall. Thanks for joining me, Rachel.
Thank you for having me.
You are part of a wave, some might say a tidal wave, of authors writing about and advocating for the slow living movement in recent years. How did you come to the slow living movement?
Well, I can say just in terms of how it affected my life, I came to slow living really after a period of, as you mentioned in your introduction, intense work hustle. And I think what I really was drawn to about the movement is that it prioritized so much of what I was interested in my first life when I was running a business called The Style Line. And with that, I was featuring a lot of artists, writers, designers who were championing movements like slow food and slow fashion. And so I had access to these ideas through those lenses, seeing how they prioritized quality over quantity, sustainability, and making sure everything that they were doing sort of laddered back to a mission outside of just output for the sake of output. And so I think with slow living, I was drawn to seeing how that could be applied to our lives online. So much of what I was doing before writing this book was very much in the internet digital space. And so I wondered why we weren't applying those kind of values and ideas to the ways we were telling stories and showing up in a digital landscape. And so I decided to sort of tackle those ideas by starting a project called Slow Stories, where I would interview people about their relationship with pace and kind of hear about how they were approaching living with more intention in this very volatile landscape.
Learning how to turn it off sounds like a reasonable goal, but how can we disconnect from the constant pressures of life without feeling guilty or unproductive?
I've learned to equate slow living with slow storytelling. So I think really just reimagining the narratives we're telling ourselves about how to show up effectively and to not feel guilty. I think there's so much that society tells us about what success is supposed to look like personally, professionally, and just really having the space or creating the space to say, I'm going to change how I think about X, whether that's how I'm approaching my job or my life or my, relationships, and really just kind of starting with the stories that I think we've come to know and reshaping how we think about those things.
With anxiety levels rising, how can someone adopt a slow living lifestyle while not adding to their anxiety by feeling they may risk falling behind?
Just really taking the time to be present with where you are and to meet yourself where you are, whether that's adopting routines that allow you to notice the little things. For me, something that I've done when I'm facing anxiety is looking at light, looking at natural elements in the world, and really just kind of grounding myself with the everyday beauty that isn't attached to any sort of output or validation that's there and kind of is bigger than us.
Rachel, there will be times when we feel hurried, we feel pushed, there's an urgent matter requiring our attention. Is that competing energy, or does it have a place in slow living?
I think it definitely has a place in slow living. I've said this before, but you can't be slow 100% of the time, and understanding what you can control and really learning to let go of the external. Something that I like to talk about in my book, Slowing, is just, taking a moment to recalibrate by, again, looking at the little things and knowing that our days are made up of those things. And if we pay credence to them, then the things that are kind of requiring a little bit more from us energetically are more manageable if we, take a minute to just kind of shift our perspective back to the things that are right in front of us.
As you know, our culture celebrates goal setting and constant achievement. What do both of these things look like for someone living a slow living lifestyle?
Meeting goals is something that gets me out of my comfort zone more than signals to the world that I've met a certain milestone or have checked a box. I think those things eventually, when you do practice maybe slowing down or slow living, it becomes a lot more private. And I think there's something really special, especially in a landscape where we're giving so much of ourselves so freely.
How much is slow living about changing our mindset regarding achievement and productivity?
I think it's definitely more of a mindset shift more than anything else. People tend to look at movements like slow living as a lifestyle or even an aesthetic. And so I think, as somebody who's spent most of their life in New York City, people ask me all the time, how are you able to practice slow living or slowing down in a place so predicated on movement? But I'd almost argue that a city provides more opportunities to again notice, to pay attention, to connect with other people. And so I think you kind of have to, again, meet yourself where you are. So it's definitely more of a mindset than something that tangibly allows you to slow down.
Why do so many of us struggle to give ourselves permission to slow down? What aspects of slow living do we risk missing out on if we fail to create space to make mindful choices?
There is this culture of having to prove ourselves in a lot of ways. And so I think people think that slow living might be something that's taking away rather than adding. I think it's an opportunity to move closer to what we value and almost recenter ourselves and give ourselves, in turn, more energy to go after the things that matter to us. I always struggle if somebody asks me for advice on, how to adopt this because I think it's so individual to the person, really reimagining what certain chapters of our lives are supposed to look like and giving ourselves permission to maybe write a new ending or beginning.
Practicing patience, and I do mean practice, is something to do for yourself as well as those around you. What are some things to be mindful of here, and what's a straightforward way to practice patience?
Asking questions. We live in a culture where we like to make statements or definitive answers to something, and really being patient requires understanding and empathy. And so I think whether, we're trying to be more patient with ourselves or with others, just opening space for dialogue and introspection is a really helpful way, at least for me, to be patient if I'm not seeing a certain outcome or I'm moving in a direction that I didn't expect to, or I'm not moving fast enough. Asking why I feel the need to maybe go at a certain pace to get there. But yeah, asking questions is definitely something that has made me more patient and attentive.
Carving out time for deliberate breaks during the day, such as eating a proper lunch away from your desk. I'm guilty of doing that a lot. May be difficult to do. What are some small, practical ways to begin your slow living journey?
I think anything that gets you back in your body is a really helpful way to be more present, to slow down. That's as simple as going for a walk in your neighborhood. I like to carry a small notebook and journal when I need to or when I see something that has captured my attention. I also am big on photography. So, one of the prompts in my book, Slowing, is to go out at golden hour and to kind of study the light and study the environment and just kind of get out of your own blue light and screens, so to speak. Anything that takes you outside of yourself, but also allows you to be a little bit more present in the world. And when I say outside of yourself, I mean outside of your head.
For some, the holidays may be hectic. For others, perhaps too quiet and too slow. Can you offer any slow living practices we can embrace during the holiday season, no matter how much or how little time we have to spare?
Well, disconnecting is always a good one. Keeping our phones out of sight, logging off, being really present with loved ones, or if you need a moment of solitude, just being present with yourself. as I keep saying, really big on stories. So snuggling up with a good book or something that kind of inspires your creativity is always a great way to slow down and reconnect with something that inspires you, especially during the holidays, which I found to be a very sensorial time. There's lights, there's great food, great atmosphere. It's a great place to start.
Rachel, thank you so much for joining me on The Excerpt.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for watching. I'm Dana Taylor. I'll see you next time.